I work with an organization called Standard Chartered Bank. I'm a senior manager there in charge of information and cybersecurity. And I have been mandated by Cyberroot to speak on cybersecurity challenges in the financial services industry. All the previous speakers have actually done a wonderful job in their presentations, very instructive, interesting, and incisive presentations they've done, every single one of them. And I will have to now take it forward from there. I thank them a lot for what they've done so far. And I also thank Cyberroot for this for setting up this platform for this discussion we are having. It's there's no gain saying that cybersecurity is actually everyone's business. People should be sensitized. People should be made aware of their responsibilities with respect to cybersecurity, just like it is with any other security initiative, be it physical security, be it security of your assets, I mean physical assets. Same premium, the same attention should be given to cybersecurity. Now, going into the crux of why I'm here. So I have to give a little bit of a background of why of how cybersecurity became a big issue in the financial services industry. So I will start by saying that everything is rooted in technology and innovation, right? So with the massive technology and automation revolution, somebody mentioned that I think I heard somebody mention that we are in the fourth industrial revolution, right? And that fourth industrial revolution is based on information technology, is based on automation, is based on the information superhighway that we refer to as the internet, right? So this has also, this has enabled a whole lot of things to be done. People now have organizations and people have moved their storage and management and processing of critical and sensitive information and assets and resources to both tangible and non-tangible to the internet. The national institutions, of course, have also joined that frenzy or that bandwagon, if I may say, and they have used automation and technology solutions to enable a whole lot of wonderful products and services. But of course, this has also made them vulnerable to cybercrimes and attacks. I also want to provide a little definition of what the internet is, because when we talk about cyber security, we are talking about security, securing our information assets that are connected to the internet, which is the cyberspace, right? So the internet is a massive network that interconnects. Please, can we meet our distance, please? So the internet is a massive network and interconnection of computers with the purpose of sharing and processing of information amongst the interconnected or networked computers. Internet is an acronym for international network. So having said this, this technology and innovation has also brought about certain unwanted implications or consequences, right? Criminals have migrated or are even continue to migrating in droves from the typical I'll call it brick and mortar way of stealing and committing crime, like what we have in the physical world, to the internet, to the logical world, to now perpetrate their nefarious acts or activities. As we all know, criminals are always ingenious and daring in what they do, and they devote a lot of time and resources to perfect their acts. Thus, they are almost always one step ahead of security personnel most of the time, making the job of thwarting the attacks difficult, but of course not impossible. Cyber criminals are particularly attracted to financial institutions. Now, we're narrowing it down to financial institutions, which is where I am mandated to speak on. Cyber criminals are particularly attracted to financial institutions because of the perceived huge reward associated with compromising and stealing the assets of financial institutions. Now, these rewards could be anything from financial gain, which people have spoken about. You know, financial gain means having financial reward for committing that cybercrime, to people just pranking people, attacking people just for the sake of prank, for fun. To activism. Now, when I say activism, I mean like people using cyber attack to prove a point, probably a social point. Like you have activists that are, always trying to make a point, whether political point or social point. So they can also use cyber attacks to also make those points. We call them hacktivists, or we call that concept hacktivism. So these are activists that are cyber attackers, right? So other motives could be espionage. It could also be based on hatred. I just don't like this person. I want to make sure I bring the person down. I don't like this organization. I want to bring this organization down. So people could be inspired by hate. It could be intimidation, and that's also another motive. It could be also business competition. So you see, I want to demarket. I want to make sure that I completely ruin the reputation of my competitor. So I go there to probably attack them. Launch a cyber attack on them to create a bad image of them. Breach their data, deface their websites, all sorts of things. Make them to pay fine. Because of the breach that I have orchestrated. So you see, customers will now start seeing them in very bad light. And this is also one of the motives that people launch cyber attacks. Cyber warfare, these are state actors now. So you see here that US accusing Russia of launching cyber attacks on them. You can imagine, everyone remember the Hillary Clinton and Trump election process, where Hillary accused Russia of aiding and abetting and working in concert with Trump to breach her email and breach her email and expose certain information in her email, right? So these are also what we call cyber warfare, right? So the cybersecurity, by definition, is the security of information assets and resources against the compromise of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is normally called CIA. That's the concept of CIA. That's the triad of information and cybersecurity, really. So if you compromise, whether intentionally or unintentionally, any of these concepts, then you have breached the security of that particular asset. I don't want to go into what confidentiality and integrity and availability mean, but it may also be important. So confidentiality means when an information that is not supposed to get to someone that is not authorized, when he or she gets access to an information or an asset he's not supposed to get to, then the conversion of that information has been breached. Integrity means modification or destruction of an information. So when you now breach the information, when information is breached and somebody has access let it be that he just has access. Let it not be that he can also modify the content of that information or even destroy that information. Then availability means that people that are supposed to have access to an information, they should always have that access to that information anytime they need it. So that is what we call availability. So these are the concept, the main pillars or triad of information and cybersecurity. The compromise could be, like I mentioned, intentional or unintentional. In the following slides, I'm going to show or project or portray some of the various impacts of of cyber attacks on organizations, right? So here we have cybercrime is a growing threat. People have already spoken about threats. Threat that is anything that can exploit a vulnerability, right? Threat agents are those things that are now being used to do that exploitation, right? So cybercrime is a growing threat to corporations and consumers who are increasingly adopting and dependent on mobile and digital technology to run their business and lives. So it is estimated globally that the cost of damage through cybercrime, for example, in 2015 was $3 trillion US. In 2021, it's moved from $3 trillion US to $6 trillion US. So you can imagine. So it grew by 100%, right? 100% from 2015 to 2021, huge. So that is what organizations, countries, and whatever, agents, entities, people, human beings, lost as a result of cyber attacks, right? So, and there are different damages that organizations, entities can incur as a result of cyber attacks. One of them is financial losses. I mentioned that, right? When we say some people are motivated by financial gains, right? Then damage to reputation. That's also another loss you can suffer. Loss of data is also another loss you can suffer. Disruption to operations is also another damage or loss you can suffer. Regulatory fines is also another loss you can suffer, because these days, regulators do not have tolerance for organizations that do not protect their information assets and resources. So they have imposed very severe fines on organizations, particularly in the financial sector. The central bank, who is our chief regulator, has imposed a lot of fines on not meeting certain information security standards. So they've rolled out a plethora of information standards that banks must comply with, from ISO 27001 to PCI DSS to ISO 22301 to all sorts. So if you don't comply with any of these standards or frameworks, you'll be fined. And it's even made worse. If your customer data or any sensitive data is breached, you also pay fine. So you see, so this is also a very good example of a very huge damage that an organization can suffer as a result of cyber attacks. In the following slide, you will see typical examples of fines that some organizations have suffered as a result of data breaches and all and their likes. So this year, this day reported that in the last, so the chief strategy officer of Deloitte has stated that Nigeria lost 5.5 trillion to fraud and cyber crimes in the last 10 years. That is huge. That is huge. I can remember as at 3 years ago, our total budget, annual budget in Nigeria was less than 5 trillion. I think it was about 4 trillion. So you can imagine our total budget as a country being stolen or lost in the last 10 years. And I'm sure it will continue to grow. So this is an example of damage and loss that can be suffered by a country, really. Yeah. So, and this is now speaking to Nigeria specifically. So 12 months of cyber attacks. So in the last 12 months, starting from September 2020, these are examples of organizations that have suffered serious cyber attacks and the consequences that they suffered. So we have Citrix, we have an Indonesian fintech data breach, we have South Korean supply chain attack. Somebody mentioned supply chain. In the previous presentation, how it is important that your third party that you deal with, you ensure that they meet certain minimum or baseline cybersecurity controls. So that because the truth is that if they are breached, invariably you will suffer. If their security is breached, any third party or partner that you deal with in the course of your business, if they are breached, you that has employed them or employed their services will suffer. So these are some of the organizations that have suffered huge cyber attacks in the last 12 months up until August 2021. And some of the monetary losses that they also incurred, right? I don't want to start reading through them. This is just a dashboard that you guys can just see, right? So in 2020, 2020 is a year of cyber attacks, and it is actually primarily, the increase is because of the pandemic. So a whole lot of people, organizations, moved their office, practically, their office to the internet. So you can imagine that. So that exposed them to a whole lot of cyber attacks. So 2020, and has also continued in 2021, these are a year of huge cyber attacks, both in terms of value of the what in terms of currency that is being lost, or monetary loss, and also in terms of information that is lost as well. So regulatory impacts. I mentioned regulatory fines as one of the losses or damages that organizations can suffer, right?
All right, Mr. Ekwochi, please begin to round up because of our time. Thank you.
Okay, so these are some of the losses some organizations incurred, right? So I have to rush here now. So Google, 15 million euro. Marriott International, Marriott is a hotel chain, 125 million USD. British Airways, 230 million USD. Equifax, 505 million USD. Impact of cybercrimes. So there are direct costs, there are indirect costs, there are damage to your brand, there are regulatory sanctions. I mentioned this, customer fraud, leadership changes, right? Major value, class action lawsuit, customer business redress. Top cybersecurity challenges specifically with financial institutions. One is how dynamic threats are. So the threat environment and threat actors continue to change. And it is very, very, very challenging meeting up with these threats. Identifying themselves is also a very huge task. And let alone trying to mitigate their impact. So this the threats are quite dynamic, and they are universal in nature. So they are everywhere. So that's a huge challenge. There's customer expectation, compliance, regulation. They also add pressure. So customer expects you to do the impossible. They keep demanding for changes in services. They want their life to be easy. The regulators also come up with a whole lot of regulation. They churn out regulation upon regulation that you must meet. So this adds pressure to the organizations in terms of cybersecurity, right? So institutions face very strict expectations from regulators and consumers alike. Regulators require that financial institutions meet an array of compliance standards. I mentioned PCI DSS, I mentioned ISO 27001, I mentioned ISO 22301, which is BCP. There are a whole lot. So organizations are required to meet all this. So challenge. Then there's also the third-party security risk. I had mentioned that. Somebody else had mentioned that this is a very huge risk. A lot of cyber security attacks emanate from this. organizations and people on leaders should watch out for this. You can protect your organization, implement wonderful controls, but if you do not also ensure that the organization you deal with are also protected, then you will also be in trouble. So insider threat is the biggest challenge we have, because the truth is that an insider has already breached your firewall, your intrusion prevention, whatever, all your layered security. Somebody mentioned layered security. An insider is already inside. So if he's already inside, you can imagine if the person, first of all, is of malicious temperament, or is not properly trained. You can imagine the havoc that insider will wreak. So organizations should ensure, first of all, they conduct proper due diligence on whoever that they are recruiting, and they train them properly and continue to monitor the activities always. Thank you very much. And I will entertain any question you may want to pose. I have to make this as short as possible.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ekwochi. We really appreciate you for that wonderful presentation. Okay, we have some question. I think we have a question from Mr. Sylvester. So, Mr. Sylvester, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ekwochi. Yeah, from your slide, you made mention of leadership.
Sorry, I can't hear you well. I don't know if it's only me.
Yes. Okay, sir. I said you made mentions of leadership during your presentation.
Of leadership.
Yes, leadership.
Okay. Yeah.
Change of leadership. So,
yes.
I believe is part of the reason why cybersecurity, cybercrime is much more in our society today. So, what can we do the moment because many of those leadership that we have in our company, in our organization, many of them don't even want to hear anything about cybersecurity, because most especially when you bring their budget, that this is the budget we are having for cybersecurity, they will just look at it and say, where do you think we can get this kind of money? Please take it away. No, but by the time that thing happens, that is the breach, it happens, they will now begin to look for so much help. So what? To mitigate it. So what do you think we can do when it comes to leadership, a change of leadership, and even a new leadership coming in? What do you think we can do to curb the menace of leadership and high cost of breach in the cybersecurity domain?
Okay, thank you very much for that very important question. Leadership is at the core of the success of any cybersecurity program. So if a leader or the senior management does not support your cybersecurity program, then it has failed from the word go. But there are two ways to mitigate this. One is, as a cybersecurity manager or officer, or the CISO, as the case may be, you need to be strategic. You need to be a business. You need to think like the business for you to get the sponsorship or the buy-in or the support of senior management. So whatever cybersecurity program you're implementing, you must tie it to what the value the business will derive, how it's going to impact positively to their profit and loss account. What I mean, their bottom line, right? How does that impact their balance sheets? You tell them, okay, I give you an example. You tell them, okay, you see, we are having, this is just hypothetical figures that I'm going to quote here, right? We're having 1,000 cyber attacks in a month. And in that 1,000, we are making a loss of, say, 50 million every month. You tell them, if I implement an intrusion prevention system, I will bring down the attacks from 1,000 to, say, 50. And the loss to, say, from 50 million to, say, 5 million. If you present it to you, that's a good business case, right? If you present it to senior management that way, they will buy it. I am almost sure that they will buy that idea. That is one. Secondly is regulators also have a big role to play. Thankfully, in the industry I work in, it is mandated for banks to implement an array of cybersecurity standards and framework. So the CEO or the management, they don't have any option to support that, except they want to lose their license of operating in that industry. So one is the CISO or the information security manager should be able to relate and talk to the senior management to get their support in the language that they understand, which is the business language. Secondly, is that the government, I'm talking about regulator. Regulator is also the government, should also support this cybersecurity initiatives by mandating it on the players in that industry to make sure that they implement certain minimum requirements for cybersecurity, right? So I hope I have answered your question. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you very much. You have really answered it. Thank you. While I hand over to the host, thank you very much.